Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
The bill couldn't even clear committee. Welcome to the Friday edition as President Trump's big, beautiful bill fails to pass the Budget Committee in the House. And now the entire timeline is being thrown into question. I'm Mathieu alongside Kailey, Leinz in Washington. Thanks for being with us on the Friday edition of Balance of Power. Kailey, a big point of disagreement remains lifting the cap on salt. So not a lot has changed since this time yesterday.
Yeah, there's still many who want the salt cap lifted even higher than $30,000. But then there's also fiscal conservatives who want to see the cost-saving measures kick in earlier when it comes to Medicaid work requirements, rolling back measures in the Inflation Reduction Act. And it's those fiscal conservatives that actually took things down in the Budget Committee today. And what was supposed to just be procedure. This committee doesn't have power to change the legislation, and yet it tanked anyway. A
procedural vote, essentially assembling the pieces of this bill. We saw a number of Republicans, to your point, from the Freedom Caucus, a la Chip Roy, Ralph Norman, and so on, voting with Democrats. And I suspect that their phones will be ringing today as President Trump makes his way back from the Middle East.
Yeah, keeping in mind that the president took to True Social today talking about how he wants Republicans to unite behind this one big, beautiful bill. But certainly you're seeing a degree of lack of unity, shall we say, on Capitol Hill right now. And that is actually where we go now live here on Bloomberg TV and radio. As joining us is Republican Congressman Nick Lalotta, who represents New York's 1st Congressional District. He, of course, is in the SALT caucus and is one of the members who has been advocating for a higher cap. Congressman, welcome back to Balance of Power. Obviously, there are you and your colleagues who are pushing for a higher SALT cap up against some of these fiscal conservatives who worry what that does to the ultimate price tag. Is there a world here in which those who shot things down in the Budget Committee can get what they want and you get what you want too, or does someone have to lose in this equation?
Yeah, I'm comfortable we're going to land this plane. Ultimately, we all support the concepts behind the one big, beautiful bill. We all want a stronger border security when we want to put the nation on a better fiscal track. And there's some other priorities in there as well that are really important. Energy dominance, really important to the House Republican Conference. We've met other deadlines in the past about, responsibly raising debt ceilings, ensuring the government was funded, doing things responsibly like that under a deadline. I hope that we could do that again this time. This one big, beautiful bill has a couple of warts on it, but I think that we can work through that in order to get it passed ultimately.
Well, Congressman, it's good to have you back. I know you weren't happy with the level that was coming out of the Ways and Means Committee when it came to lifting the cap on salt. So are you actually encouraged by what happened in the Budget Committee today, or are you concerned about the way forward?
Well, it just recognizes the obvious. There are numerous factions within the conference who are displeased with different aspects of the bill. SALT, of course, has gotten a lot of coverage, but there are folks in the conference who are concerned about SNAP, about Medicaid, and of course, the deficit hawks have their concerns. So there are a couple of things holding this bill up. I hope that we get to yes, but with respect to SALT is a pay-for. The bill as written right now from 2017 has the SALT cap expiring at the end of the year and going back to unlimited. And unlimited SALT over the next 10 years is valued at $1.3 trillion. And that's what's going to happen if no bill passes and if folks like me vote no and others vote no, and ultimately we don't extend those tax cuts. So I think the onus is on others to meet us a little bit in the middle. $1.3 trillion is a lot to incentivize some other great provisions in the one big beautiful bill. The president's priorities on no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, the AMT fix, the lower individual rates, the lower business rates. My constituents want all of that, but we don't want to have to pay for the bill again like we paid in 2017. We want a little more fairness this time around.
Well, and Congressman, when you joined us a few days ago, you told us that this idea of a $40,000 SALT cap for individuals and $80,000 for married couples hadn't been explicitly put on the table, that it was something that was obviously in this discussion. Have you gotten an explicit offer for a higher SALT cap, or is that something you're expecting this weekend? Where do things stand?
Yeah, that 40-80 dynamic unfortunately had a poison pill in it, in that there was 40-80 for 4 or 5 years, and it dropped way down to 10 again for the next 5 or 6 years. That unfortunately is a gimmick, it's a scam, it just perpetuates the very thing my constituents and I are opposed to right now, this absurdly low 10K cap. That was really just a used car salesman trick that we didn't fall for. We're going to continue to negotiate in good faith to make sure that New Yorkers, New Jerseyans, and Californians get their fair share, because each of us are donor states. Each of our states' taxpayers send way more to Washington than we get back. New York gets about 91 cents for every dollar it sends to Washington, while Missouri, home state to the tax committee chairman, gets $1.60, and Louisiana, home state to the speaker, gets $1.78. So we're not looking for a handout, we're just looking for a fair share and an honest negotiation on how we can move this ball forward.
Well, I know this is a big issue for you. It's something you're passionate about. Congressmen and members of the New York delegation have been strident in their rhetoric in some cases. Would you be willing to vote no on this whole thing if it meant just eliminating the cap altogether, if you can't come to terms on the rest?
If it eliminates the cap altogether, heck, count me in. Let's book it as a yes and let's move on, if that's your question.
No, I mean, would you vote no if it meant allowing that to reset to zero?
Oh, to have no deductibility on the state and local taxes whatsoever?
To eliminate the cap. To go back to where we were before 2017.
That would do it for me. Count me in if we eliminate the cap.
But would you vote no to get there?
Sorry, I don't understand your question. No, I would vote yes on a bill that eliminates the cap. Right now, the cap is $10,000. They're offering $30,000. If they offer unlimited, count me in. Let's go. Let's make America great again.
There's a chance this bill might not pass, though, according to some congressmen. You may not see it that way. If this whole thing falls apart, does that help you enough in New York to eliminate this cap to put up with not having the Trump tax cuts?
No, so here's how the negotiation is going to go. If it falls apart, if the bill falls apart in the next couple of days, weeks, or month, everybody's going to rush back to the negotiating table and say, how can we salvage this? And at that point in time, the reality will be apparent to everybody else that what is on the table at that point in time is unlimited SALT. And then we can negotiate down from unlimited rather than up from $10,000. Now, I don't want to get there, but that's the negotiating reality. As the president would say, we have a lot of the cards in this negotiation, but we want to be professionals, we want to be gentlemen about this, and we want to do what's right for the nation. But at the end of the day, you can't stick the blue states with the bill for everybody else's tax incentives like what happened in 2017. The political dynamic is much different this time around. These blue state Republicans like Lawler and Kim and others and Tom Kaine made our majority, and we can't sell them out to pay for and fund the rest of the tax cuts. We have to ensure there's some equity in this bill, and we acknowledge those realities. We'll get to yes. We need to get the president's agenda through. We need to have those overall great tax incentives for America. The negotiations will continue through both in person, over the phone, and on text this weekend, and we'll ultimately get there.
Well, of course, even if you can get there in the House, it then goes to the Senate, Congressman. And what you're describing, the fact that there are Republican members from blue states in the House, is not an issue in the U.S. Senate. Are you concerned that the Senate might actually reduce back a higher SALT cap you fought for, or look at some of the pay-fors that have been suggested, whether it's Medicaid or rollbacks to the Inflation Reduction Act, make them go away, and then you have a new problem in the House again when it comes to the total tally?
Yeah, so maybe we should invite you to our negotiating team, because those are the things that we're talking about right now. We want to ensure that if we do a deal here in the House, it's a deal that will be ratified by both the Senate and the President. So while we're having these discussions on the House side right here, contemporaneous, we want to have some assurances from others who are participating in this one big, beautiful bill. They too will ratify exactly the deal that we come to in the House. That's an important measure. We don't want to just take a vote for the sake of taking a vote here in the House and have our provisions die in the Senate. So what we negotiate here before we get to a yes here has to be assured that it'll pass the Senate and be signed by the President.
So how's it going to work this weekend, Congressman? Bring us behind the scenes, if you would. Are there a series of meetings planned? You mentioned phone calls and texts. Maybe you're going to get a phone call from President Trump, but will you be on Capitol Hill? Will you be working in committee rooms, or how does it come together on a Saturday and a Sunday with a deadline that you're facing?
So the House is not in session. Many of my colleagues went home yesterday, but as you can see from behind me, I'm still here on Capitol Hill, eager to make this deal work. I will continue to collaborate with not just members of the SALT Caucus, but those who see this issue differently than me. Happy to work together, and as a conference, as a House Republican conference, we've gotten through and over hurdles like this in the past. I expect my colleagues from the upper chamber to work in good faith as well, and certainly the president wants to get this across the finish line. It is worthy of the nation's attention, is worthy to that we work over the weekend and through the night, talk, text, in person, whatever it takes, Zoom. We'll continue to keep the door open and keep the dialogue going to get this one big, beautiful bill passed.
And are these negotiations going to be bilateral, if you will, between the Speaker's office and the SALT Caucus, or are you going to have to include members of the Freedom Caucus like Chip Roy and Ralph Norman, who obviously are the ones that helped take this thing in the budget in the first place? Are these trilateral negotiations?
Yeah, I think this is going to be an all-hands-on-deck effort, as it's been in the last couple of days, especially. We had a meeting yesterday in the Speaker's office with members of the Republican conference whose politics are much different. We had folks in there whose districts Trump won by 50, and those who Harris won by 3, 4, or 5. People with different constituencies, different priorities, different views of the world. I think it's important that we continue to talk with each other. I've been talking and texting with some of those folks here who come from some of those deep red districts. You know, we all have to come together at the end of the day to put this nation on a better track. You know, we're a nation $36 trillion in debt, $2 trillion deficit. A lot of folks are living paycheck to paycheck. They're eager to see Washington Republicans come together to ensure that we have a tax bill, an overall spending bill that's best for our country, and we'll work with each other regardless of political persuasion to ensure that gets done.
Really important conversation, Congressman. We really appreciate your being with us shortly after the Budget Committee vote. That's Nick Lalotta with a working weekend ahead, as you just heard, the Republican from New York. We thank you, as always, for joining here on Bloomberg TV and radio. We want to add the voice of Laura Davison, our Deputy Bureau Chief here in Washington, D.C., and one of our political team leaders. Laura, it's great to see you. What you just heard from the gentleman from New York, we're going to stay the weekend. We're going to keep working on this. Sounds just like Chip Roy. I'm staying in Washington this weekend to deliver. How about we get these two together to figure it out?
It certainly seems like this bill is not advancing at the rate that House Speaker Mike Johnson wants. This, this sort of stunning defeat in the Budget Committee. That doesn't happen. This is really a procedural rubber stamp effort, and the fact that the bill went to committee knowing that it didn't have the votes and then failed indicates that there are serious issues that could really threaten the chances of this bill passing the House next week, as Mike Johnson has wanted. The House then is at least scheduled to recess for 2 weeks, means that they wouldn't be until mid-June that they pick this back up. I think we could see a lot of schedule changing in the House if it looks like things are falling back, as Representative Lalotta just said. If things, if fall apart in the next couple of days, you expect to see people rushing back to the negotiating table to figure out how to salvage the Medicaid issue, the SALT issue, the spending issue. All of this is of deep concern.
Well, and of course, it's not just of deep concern for Speaker Johnson, who wants to get this done, but for President Trump, too. When you have the president taking to Truth Social saying that we don't need grandstanders in the Republican Party, stop talking and get it done, saying Republicans must unite behind the one big beautiful bill, and then hours later, 5 Republicans, although one was just for procedural reasons, 4 Republicans really in the Budget Committee decide to specifically not advance the president's bill. What does that signal about his power in all of this?
It signals that he doesn't have the ability to keep this party together. That's been his superpower through all of this, is that he's been able to put out a tweet saying people, hey, fall in line, and they have. Right now, that is not the case that's happening. It's clear the president is very frustrated with this process. That Truth Social post you just read, that was in a series of a long list of angry posts from the president this morning.
Including about Taylor Swift.
He was clearly angry about a lot of things, from pop culture to budget reconciliation. I think that covers the full gamut. But this is clear that that he has kind of from the top of this negotiation said, look, get it done. I don't really care how you do it, but just make sure these tax cut bills pass. As tariffs continue to percolate, you have people like Walmart coming out saying prices are going to rise. That's even more mounting pressure on the White House to get a tax bill done, and quickly.
I want to go back to where you started here, Laura. And first of all, the rarity of a bill failing in committee like this, I mean, is a little bit of egg on face, I'm assuming, for the chair, unless Jody Arrington was trying to make a point. But also what this means potentially for the long-term status of this bill. Are we making too much of this to suggest that this whole thing could fall apart, or it's simply about getting everyone back in a room and coming up with a plan B?
Those are sort of the two options here. One, this may be a small blip, and in a couple days they've ironed out these details. They had that little bit of a public embarrassing moment and decide, okay, let's move forward with unity. it could also mean that this is just, sort of the signs of deeper troubles to come. I'll also note that you have senators already coming out, Republican senators saying that they won't support this bill, they can't support this bill. There's going to need to be big changes, scaling back some of these Medicaid cuts. That's something that House members are thinking about, particularly moderates. They don't want to have to take a tough vote on a bill that really scales back something that may be unpopular in their district, and then have that totally rewritten by the Senate. So you're seeing a lot of political considerations, not just between House Republicans, but also between House and Senate Republicans, of what is a bill that can get 50, the 51, 50 in the Senate and 218 in the House. That's not an easy feat.
Well, and when you talk about Medicaid cuts in particular, obviously for Chip Roy and co., that is part of their problem, is these new rules around work requirements, for example, aren't supposed to kick in for several more years. They would like to see it kicking in sooner. Was there a reason that this wasn't supposed to happen until 2029? Are they trying to get around issues potentially in the midterms until changes are made? Why wouldn't they have just done it from the jump?
The reason is why these tax cuts are set to expire. You put all the juicy stuff, the stuff that people like at the beginning, and you put the tough stuff at the end of the budget window. So 2029, I'll note that's when after the 2028 presidential election, after the midterms, the stuff that people aren't going to like and are going to feel the impacts of, that's a future Congress's problem, and it also gives this Congress a lot of time to potentially repeal that if you want to. There's a lot of things we've seen Congress do this time and time again. If they have to do something unpopular, they have to make a decision to raise some revenue. They'll put that in the future, and then that's a problem for another day.
We've seen Donald Trump flip votes before. One of these no votes came from Ralph Norman. He got a phone call from Donald Trump last time the speaker's a job was at risk, and about 10 minutes later he got off the cell phone and changed his vote. Could we see something along those lines?
We very much could. Trump is clearly whipping this bill himself, though both in public as well as in private, making calls to members. He wants to get this done. It's interesting to see, though, how many people are willing to buck him on this is supposed to be Republicans' signature legislative achievement, and it's not clear right now that they can do that.
Well, and when we consider that, and to come back to the idea that the midterms are next year, is this House conservative saying, okay, we're probably going to lose the House in 2026, therefore we need to make this exactly what we want now. This is our last chance to actually do something more dramatic when it comes to debt and deficits, and basically saying the majority is going to be lost anyway, or that they still think they can walk this hard line and retain the majority in 2026.
That's what they're publicly saying, but privately, House Republicans know that there's a very strong chance that they could lose the chamber. That's just kind of the tradition. History suggests that's a very much a possibility. But this is where the tension is. You have the hardliners saying, let's get everything that we can get done right now. And you have the moderates, people who want SALT, and others saying, don't cut Medicaid for my district. I need to expand SALT. Those are the things I need to get reelected. And the only way you, House Republicans, have a majority is if we have these districts around New York, in Southern California. So you have two sort of very much competing visions at odds here.
President Trump, on his way back from Abu Dhabi today, saw quite a number of posts on social media, as you guys suggested. We only had this one, the Taylor Swift post. The President of the United States. Has anyone noticed that since I said I hate Taylor Swift, she's no longer hot? What's going on that airplane?
It's Trump coming down from the high that he had in the Middle East. He was showered with praise. He had horses. There were dancers. There were, the whole spectacle. And, he also didn't get a lot of sleep. He went very late every single night.
Wow.
One colleague mentioned it's like when your child has a sleepover, comes home, had all sorts of fun, doesn't get any sleep, and then suddenly they're cranky and in a bad mood the next day.
I just want to know what he saw.
Who was he talking to?
Did someone start playing Taylor Swift on Air Force One?
It's a great question.
Where did it come from?
Taylor was in the air.
We'll have to wait for answers for another day, perhaps. Laura Davison, Washington Deputy Bureau Chief for us here at Bloomberg, with us on Balance of Power. So I guess she's no longer hot?
That's what he says.
News to me.
You'd know this more than I.
I'm still a fan.
I guess so. Maybe we'll play that to the panel next. We've got a good one today.
Yes.
Roger Fisk, Lisa Camuso-Miller, their take on a breaking news day here in Washington. We'll have a lot more straight ahead on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Kailey, Leinz. I'm Joe Mathieu. This is Balance of Power, only on Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
News tends to break every day around 12 noon when we come on the air. We're ready for it. That's why we meet here every day. Happened again today, as we're going to discuss with our panel in just a moment. The one big, beautiful bill the president's talked so much about. couldn't even get through the budget committee. And so it is back to the drawing board on Capitol Hill with a bit of a protest by the Freedom Caucus slowing things down. We've also got a breaker on the terminal right now, and it's coming from the Federal Reserve. Don't confuse this with a Doge story because they may not be related. We're just learning this now at Bloomberg. As the Fed announces plans, or we're reporting plans, to shrink the Fed's workforce by about 10%. Job cuts are coming to the Fed. It'll happen over the next several years, mainly through attrition. According to people familiar speaking with Bloomberg, the Fed's going to be offering deferred resignations to some workers, according to sources we're talking about. And so the shrinkage continues here in Washington, whether Elon Musk is in town or not. And we assemble our panel here on the Friday edition, and we've got a good one for you. Roger Fisk is back, former special advisor to President Obama, our Democratic strategist. And, of course, the great Republican strategist, Lisa Camuso-Miller, former R-N-C comms director, host of the Friday Reporter podcast, who spent a good chunk of her career working for a Republican Speaker of the House. Not this one, but she's seen this movie before. And, Lisa, I'll start with you on what just took place here. Couldn't even clear committee? What does that tell us about the long-term forecast for this legislation?
Well, Joe, I think it means that there is a long way to go, and we're not going to get to the Rules Committee on Monday. Then that is for certain.
That allows time for a recovery, though, for Speaker Johnson. Is this a bump in the road? Chip Roy just needs to feel better? How do you get around this roadblock?
I'm not certain how they can. And in fact, I think if anything, this is going to be a weekend where they're going to work really hard to try to get this through. But once again, I mean, this goes back to this whole strategy that comes from the White House about a big, beautiful bill, right? And the House said that they didn't think they could get it done. And the Speaker said they didn't think they could get it done. And the Senate didn't think they could get it done. And they were right. And so I think a lot of what's happening here is, you have an up and down vote in the budget. There's no opportunity in budget committee, so there's no opportunity for amendments. You've got 4 members of the Freedom Caucus that are in the budget committee, and those guys are they were hardline no before they even went to the committee this morning. So this isn't terribly surprising, but what was supposed to happen is they were supposed to come to agreement. The bill was supposed to get out of committee. It was supposed to come from all the relevant committees. They were supposed to get it all together and get it off to Rules Committee for a Monday vote. Just feels like it's not going to happen. And so that to me tells me exactly what I expected to see happen. It's what people have been saying all along. This is a much, much longer road to go. The Speaker is really eager to get this done by Memorial Day. It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen to me.
How many people have come on the air to say, yeah, give them to the end of the year. Meet me in September. Roger, the Freedom Caucus sent a tweet. They know the phone's going to be ringing soon here. Ralph Norman's in for it, right? Remember Donald Trump rolled Ralph Norman in the most recent Speaker vote. Took one phone call. It was like 10 minutes later. He went back and voted again. They together sent out a tweet here. These are the objecting representatives led by Chip Roy. We were making progress, it says, before the vote in the Budget Committee, and we'll continue negotiations to further improve the reconciliation package. We're not going anywhere. And we will continue to work through the weekend. Roger Fisk, what will happen this weekend?
A lot of long, detailed, frustrating conversations that, to Lisa's point, probably go nowhere. And thank you for having me. And it's wonderful to be here with Lisa. It's kind of the curse of the 3 Bs, right? It's the Biden administration tried to do Build Back Better. Now this is the big, beautiful bill. And I think every administration would be well served by looking at their predecessor, be they friend or foe, and learning from the mistakes and the successes. And one of the mistakes of the Biden administration was going with the Build Back Better bill that was just too big and too broad and too vague. And the bigger a bill is, the bigger there are kind of definitions of what beautiful are within that. Then you have hardliners like Congressman Roy, like you mentioned, Congressman Norman, Andrew Clyde, who Ralph Norman says is against this, but I guess by now is probably on record as definitely being against it. And that gives license to some of the other members of the GOP House to create some separation. Normally, this should have happened in the first 100 days when the incoming administration has momentum and a lot of goodwill, but this is post Signalgate, post Qatari plane, post a couple stumbles where some of those frontline Republicans, when you throw in the SALT issue and some of the other things that we've talked about earlier this week, that they realize maybe there's more value in having a little distance from the president than voting to kick a couple 100,000 people off healthcare in their district. And that's the dynamic they're going to try to align this weekend, and it'll be a steep climb for the speaker.
Noted. We're now living in the post-Qatari plane era of the Trump administration.
There's before the plane and there's after the plane.
That's right. We're in now AP territory. Right. Did you hear what Roger just said? Did you come up with that? Build back better, big, beautiful bill.
The curse
Lisa?
of the three Bs.
Are there parallels here?
Roger, you're a messaging genius, and I love that you said that. I've been laughing since you did. I mean, really, it just does seem like it's politically tone deaf, and it's a little more of the same. It's just, to me, like, here we go again. And you're absolutely right, Joe. That plane really, I think, took a lot of the political moment out of this trip. So not only, look, this bill may have had. Trump is going to come back. He's going to celebrate. He's going to be pleased with how all the deals that he made while he was there and all the things that have happened. And the only thing that overshadowed all of that was this silly plane that he wanted to take back, right? But the difficulty here, too, is that he had built up a lot of really good momentum that was going into this big, beautiful bill. And then the tariff discussion started to happen. And that, I think, the timing of all of that is really going to make it even harder, right? Because I have heard other folks smarter than me talk about how the carriages are coming, all of the containers are coming from China, and they've arrived. And so it's about to be very difficult for people to be happy with the way the economy is running.
You guys are on a roll. Roger Chip Roy tweeting himself. This is not the caucus now. This is the individual. We're making progress, he says, but the vote was called and the problems were not resolved. So I voted no. He says, I'm staying in Washington this weekend to deliver. Medicaid work requirements must start now, not 2029, and the Green New Scam, he says, must be fully repealed, as President Trump called for. You would think that this is a message to Democrats having an argument from the other side of the aisle. Are Republicans arguing with Republicans about the Green New Scam?
It's amazing to me that people still refer to the Green New Deal as if it became law at some point, and when in fact it's still essentially kind of like a philosophical construct on behalf of the squad and things like that. The climate and the clean energy elements of what Biden actually did were much more focused on infrastructure jobs and retrofitting buildings and things like that than they were about some fundamental paradigm shift about how the country fuels itself. But you see ads and attacks all the time that refer to the Green New Deal as if it's part of the law of the land, when in fact it's not. And that, to me, plays into the performative nature that we're seeing on all sides. So you have your Thomas Masseys and these other people that are more than happy to slow these things down. And so I used to say this with Speaker McCarthy, I would imagine Speaker Johnson gets up a couple days and says, why can't I just move back to Louisiana and have a normal life? This has to be incredibly frustrating because they have full control of the government, just as in the first 2 years of the first Trump administration. They couldn't even get their votes aligned to fund the wall. We're seeing that same kind of dysfunction play out now.
You know what, Roger, don't you think
God, life was even better in the radio business. Lisa, please go ahead. What's your response? Because I want to hear your take on what's going to happen this weekend.
Well, what I was going to say was that that's the traditional playbook, and that would be that the president is in the White House and the Republicans in their House and the Senate, but it's the president himself that makes this so much more difficult. I mean, he continues to make news. It used to be that there was sort of this cadence between the White House and the Congress, and that's no longer the case. The president continues to push forward with this slash and burn and all of the things that are happening, and it's making it more and more difficult for people to really enact change. So what would ordinarily be like a trifecta of great things that could happen because Republicans are in power, they're working against each other, really. And that's, I think, what makes it even harder.
Well, bring us behind the scenes this weekend, Lisa. How does this work? Are they going to be in a committee room in the House? Are they going to be in an office building somewhere? They're going to be bringing in takeout? Are they wearing shorts and sandals? What happens over Saturday and Sunday that could change the picture by Monday?
I think it's a lot of all of that, Joe. I think everybody has a lot at stake and they really want to see it happen. And so they're going to bring in every resource that they can. They're going to be having meetings late today into tomorrow. They're going to be having calls. They're going to be working the phones. They're going to be doing everything they can to try to find levers that they can pull in order to get this to the Rules Committee. Because also, too, the Republican House really does want to deliver for the president. They really do want this bill to get done. So I do think that they're going to call out all the stops. The difficulty here is that you've got this SALT group, the group from the Northeast primarily, that are going to fight like heck to make sure that SALT gets done right. And then you've got the Freedom Caucus that are working in the opposite direction. So if you're Mike Johnson, I mean, to the point that maybe running home to Louisiana sounds pretty sweet, it does seem like this is a really, really hard job, but I think he's the right guy for the job. It seems to me like he has the right tone and tenor, and he is got the right people around him that are helping him make good choices. And that is we've seen two speakers walk away from this job, two Republican speakers walk away from this job, and there's a reason. It's because it's really hard to govern with so many different factions in the party right now, and that's exactly what we're seeing play out in real time.
You wonder if they make another run at him, depending on how this goes here. What's Hakeem Jeffries doing this weekend, Roger? He's watching TV, having a chuckle, watching the speaker do his work.
Popping popcorn, letting it play out. The president has been the greatest unifying force for the Democrats, but this additional fratricidal tension just makes it that much easier for the Democrats to avoid news cycles and let this play out with as much coverage as possible. Because this really forces some of those frontline Republicans that Lisa was just mentioning to potentially take some difficult votes. And so for the Democrats, they largely just want to make sure that they don't stop the Republicans from digging their hole.
Wow. Time to order the takeout and the wine, boys and girls, because we're hunkering down for a working weekend. What a great panel.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Thanks for being with us on the Friday edition. You made it to the threshold of the weekend. Balance of Power every day on Bloomberg Radio, on Satellite Radio Channel 121, and on YouTube. Find us right now by searching Bloomberg Business News Live. Because we've got news, high noon in Washington, and it didn't even get out of committee. That's where we stand now with the one big, beautiful bill, as Donald Trump calls it, that we have talked so much about. It failed to pass the Budget Committee. This was supposed to be a key moment. After all the wrangling, the 11 bills come together, assembled into one big, beautiful bill by the Budget Committee, so Rules could then accept it next week and it would go to the floor for one big, beautiful vote. Apparently, this is not happening. The line coming out of the Budget Committee chair. From members, I do not anticipate us coming back today. Jody Arrington speaking there. The final tally, 21-16. So who's getting a phone call from Donald Trump tonight? He's on his way back from Abu Dhabi. He's got time. He's sitting on the jet with the phone. A lot of people in the other ear. Here's the list. You don't have to look further than the terminal. Republican representatives, you can recite it for me. Chip Roy, Ralph Norman, Josh Brecheen, Lloyd Smucker, and Andrew Clyde. Voting with Democrats. If you're not too familiar with the process, it is incredibly rare for something like this to not even get out of committee. What is the speaker going to do now? It's where we start our conversation with Maya McGinnis, watching this all happen from her perch as president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Maya, it's great to see you. We've got breaking news here, and I've got a lot of questions for you as always. But based on what we just saw and heard on Capitol Hill, is there a chance that one big, beautiful bill never passes at all?
Well, first off, what timing is this, right? I'm just still processing everything that just happened after watching the whole hearing. I don't think that's the way this story ends. I think that this proceeds after there are some negotiations and some changes to accommodate the fiscal hawks who voted against it. I think it goes out of the House. I think then you have another massive, massive showdown with the Senate, which is unwilling to even do some of the reforms that the House has included. Ultimately, and I've been saying this for a while, I think It could pass as a massive budget buster, as it is currently, or it could end up being just temporary extensions and limping along to continue to figure it out. But those fiscal hawks are not comfortable with the borrowing that is in the bill, and I sympathize with them. It's huge.
Well, let's talk about busting the budget here, Maya, because as always, the committee has done quite a bit of work looking at least what we believe, what we have now in terms of legislation and what it might mean for the deficit and debt moving forward. The developing House reconciliation bill, as you write, is shaping up to add roughly $3.3 trillion to the debt through fiscal year 34, setting the stage for more than $5.2 trillion of additional debt if policymakers ultimately extend temporary provisions. And that might be right where we are, Maya, because Speaker Johnson needs to sweeten the pot for SALT Republicans, and he needs to cut even more to make the Freedom Caucus happy. So are these numbers going to be even worse?
Yeah, there's a couple of points. One, a big part of this bill is just temporary tax cuts. Remember, we're in this situation right now because there are a bunch of temporary tax cuts expiring. And you've got the Senate saying, oh, we shouldn't have to pay for them because we always meant for them to be permanent. They made them temporary, so the bill would be smaller when they first passed them in 2017. And now they're saying they shouldn't have to pay for them. And yet, in the very same breath, they're also, so far in the House, and the Senate, I assume, will do the same thing, putting in new tax cuts on a temporary basis. So it's really arguing, baselines, people are sick of baselines, I'm sure, but multiple baselines at one time. Don't charge us for extending things. Don't charge us for the full cost if they're temporary. So there is a very strong chance that these tax cuts, if they're put in place, will be extended because it always plays out that way. So the price tag will be much larger there. And then two, to your point, they're not done negotiating. The SALT folks don't think that a $30,000 cap is enough. They want to up it. This is a very expensive bill, and the fiscal hawks would not be comfortable doing that in a way where it's just deficit finance. They'd want more offsets.
We talked to Nicole Maliotakis about that around this time yesterday. The Republican from New York has this incredible scenario in which she has to straddle her sitting on the Ways and Means Committee with her membership in the SALT Caucus. So they got to $30,000, raised the cap to 30, up from 10. Here's what she told us yesterday about what that means for her district.
SALT right now is roughly, it's about $215 billion. We want to stay within that piece. Now, that may mean we need to adjust the dials. The tripling of the deduction to $30,000 covers 98% of my district. Now, would I have liked a higher number? Sure. But it's not what you want, it's what you need.
Well, here's the problem, Maya. She wasn't even allowed in a meeting with SALT Republicans the other day because of her role on the Ways and Means Committee. This is how chippy it's gotten on Capitol Hill. Does the issue of SALT as a singular issue here threaten this bill the most?
It's interesting. I saw that interview and I thought, I wonder how people will respond to that, because the SALT group is diehard on this issue. Is it the biggest threat? I don't think it's the biggest threat. I think the biggest threat is the fiscal conservatives. I think it's the debt levels. I think it is the more that bill hangs out there and people understand that you are talking about adding 3 to 5 trillion from this version. And like I said, I think it gets worse, not better. I think the real threat is that there are just enough Republicans who've been talking about the need for fiscal responsibility and spending cuts. They cannot stomach, no matter what the talking points are, they cannot stomach a bill that would add to deficits and debt. That's where I see it could break down. The SALT folks should be very happy with 30. They're still negotiating. They'll negotiate to the last minute. It's incredibly expensive. And
did you hear that from Maya McGinnis? They're listening to us right now, Maya. You're going to get the emails just like I am.
Yeah, I sure am. And I know this is the only group that's scarier is the seniors when you say something about not adding new benefits. But, there's a strong and interesting case, and people don't appreciate this, but why would states that are low tax states be subsidizing high tax states when those high tax states are getting something in return? They are getting benefits. They are getting programs. These are the decisions the states make. So it's difficult to say, well, you have fewer benefits, so you should subsidize ours, which is really what it is. Okay, I'm getting
to the heart of the matter. Yeah, I'm in big trouble. I'm going to go home after this
Sorry
is
to
over.
bring you down.
Spending time with Maya McGinnis here. As if you're just joining us, the bill failed in the Budget Committee. The lead off to the big, beautiful week that was going to end with a floor vote next week. Maya, you've been through this a couple of times. What do you think happens next? It looks like they're not coming back today. Could Speaker Johnson still pull off a floor vote next week?
I think he could. I'm not saying that it's certain at all, but I certainly think it could. First, I've been amazed because every time I look at where they are, I'm like, I don't see how you get to the next step, and they have. And I think Chair Arrington has done a great job kind of making everybody feel heard through this. I think there are some trades that could happen. It seems to me that some of the holdouts might say, in return for, or we want you to have, we are very, very uncomfortable with how these tax cuts expire, and then the savers don't phase in until after President Trump leaves office. They wait 4 or 5 years, right? So they're like, this is all backloaded in the savings. It never happens when it's structured that way. I could see them insisting that the savings is moved up, and that becomes something that would entice them to vote this out of committee. And then there might be some space for SALT there. Again, I don't think there should be, and it's so expensive, hard to do it. But I think that's what it is. It's moving up some of the savers that might get some folks to buy in.
So you're saying there's a chance?
There's
boy.
Certainly, and I think it depends on what the president has to say as well. I'm sure they will be hearing from him. And,
right. Well, that's exactly right. We've seen him turn Ralph Norman around before. I don't know if Chip Roy's taking that phone call today, Maya. This is going to be a really interesting 12-hour period to track. Maya McGinnis in the clutch. How about that at high noon here on Bloomberg? Where else are you going to hear that? With the president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. I see you, Matt Miller. If you want to email me, you can. I'm trying to ask the right questions here as we find our way to a deal on SALT. It'll happen eventually, according to Maya McGinnis. And maybe we will see a vote next week. Of course, if it happens, we'll experience it all together here on Bloomberg. We're going to have a special conversation coming up next with the former congressman from Virginia, Denver Riggleman. He's in Dubai, investing in AI. His view on the president's trip next, right here on Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
You know when to tune in. This is a routine now, right? You start at 12 Eastern, high noon, because you know there's going to be breaking news in Washington, whether the president's in town, which he's not right now, on the way back from the Middle East, and we're going to talk about his trip in a moment with Denver Riggleman, or the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, where we had a breaker, high noon. The Budget Committee fails to pass what the president calls one big, beautiful bill. Yeah, if you're just joining us, we need to catch up on this. Chair Jody Arrington delivering the news a short time ago. Listen.
Well, the noes have it. The committee stands in recess, subject to the call of the chair. I want to thank everybody for their time and patience, and Godspeed and safe travels.
Godspeed and safe travels. Saying later, dryly, for members, I do not anticipate us coming back today. The final tally, 21-16, as you heard it. Chip Roy, Ralph Norman, and company voting with Democrats to sink the bill. This coming just an hour or two after President Trump went on social media, Truth Social, calling on Republicans to unite behind one big, beautiful bill. He said, stop talking and do it. Well, guess what? Chip Roy is still talking, and at the moment, there is no way forward here. It was supposed to clear budget today, rules on Monday, to the floor in time for a big, full smash vote ahead of Memorial Day. That was supposed to be the plan. Now we're picking up the pieces, or back to the drawing board, or whatever cliche you suggest. And somebody who's been through the throes of debates like this, staring down the barrel of a deadline, in this case to a looming debt limit expiration, is Denver Riggleman. Now, we're going to talk to Denver. I thought we were going to be talking about a couple different things here, and we are, because Denver's spent the week, our former Republican congressman from Virginia, who you know from this program, has spent the week overseas, just as President Trump did. Denver now helps to run and has founded an AI company, which is what brought him over there. We're going to get into some of the investments and the important turn toward innovation in the Middle East with Denver, who's joining us right now live from Dubai. I've got to ask you, though, Denver, I guess this is why partly you're not in Congress anymore. What just happened in budget? These are members of the Freedom Caucus who sank the bill that President Trump says needs to pass. Is this thing dead? Can the speaker find a plan B?
It's not dead, but it's on life support. You know, I know all of them, right, Joe? And, you know, I've known Chip, I know Ralph, I know Jody, I know them very well. And, you know, Jody can sometimes be pretty practical, but Ralph and Chip, once they dig in, they're going to dig in. So I think what we're looking at right now is they're going to ask for concessions in order to get that out of committee. And I don't know if everybody's going to be willing to do those concessions. So I think you're going to see a couple days of crazy up there on the Hill. And with Jody coming up and saying, oh, we're not coming back today, yeah, there's going to be a lot of discussions and screaming and yelling tonight. You know, I know. So that's what's happening right now, my friend. That's what's happening right now.
And the phone calls are going out too, right? President Trump is on Air Force One with nothing to do but talk.
Yeah, I mean, who knows, you know, what he's saying right now. I mean, but I got a feeling that the phones are lighting up all over D.C.
Incredible. Whether or not we see a floor vote next week, I don't know if that's important with regard to timing for this speaker, Denver. But is Donald Trump still de facto speaker, or does Mike Johnson have any levers to pull?
Mike Johnson has no levers. No, absolutely none. It's going to be what Donald Trump says to do. And we've known that since the beginning when Mike was elected speaker. And as you know, I know Mike also. But I think what you're seeing right now is Donald Trump tried to push this train of this big, beautiful bill. But there are still certain realities that happen, especially in the Freedom Caucus and how districts vote. And you might say, well, they have to be completely behind Donald Trump. They have to completely do these type of things. But there are still some things they just can't go against. And when you're looking at this massive deficit push and what's happening with our debt and deficit, what happens is they're looking at a midterms. That's a crash and burn. And I think, Joe, that's what you're looking at. They're so worried about crash and burn midterms. And right now, they're more worried about winning their election and supporting Donald Trump. I'm telling you right now, that's what's going on.
Amazing. It's not often I get to talk to you when you're in Dubai, and I want to hear about your week. I want you to help us frame what we just saw on the president's journey, because you're there with a firsthand experience. We should let everyone know that not only does former Congressman Denver Riggleman run a distillery in beautiful Northern Virginia, well, I guess Central Virginia, but he also runs an important security firm, the Rig security firm, and now Hoodle AI, a health tech and security firm that has made Denver Riggleman one of the only people I've ever met who knows what it's like to buy a Blackwell chip. Speak to me, Denver, about the tens of billions of dollars that we saw unlocked in the Middle East this week, what this means for countries like the UAE, but also entrepreneurs like yourself.
Well, you know, sometimes you have to separate, you know, how you feel politically when you're doing business, but it's very difficult to here. And some of the things that we saw were disturbing over here, the way that, you know, Trump wanted to make his interest and things like that. But I will say this. For us, this started over a year ago. This was such a dynamic place to do business anyway, well before Donald Trump came over here. But there is an unlocking of technical and financial transfers going on. And you know what? Bloomberg reported this 6 days ago. You guys did on CFIUS, right? The Committee for Foreign Investments in the United States, and how they're going to actually streamline those actual regulatory issues. And what does that mean for the UAE and for other places here in the Middle East, like Saudi or Qatar? What that means is that you're going to have much quicker, more efficient technology transfer outside of the CFIUS type of regulatory structure that you have to use. And that was something that I did not know was going to happen. I actually read it when you all reported it. And I was on the Financial Services Committee, Joe. So I actually know how CFIUS works. So for me, the unlocking of the potential here, I believe we already had American companies coming here. I think that American companies, specifically by the UAE, have been invited to come in here and do business. And what we've seen is incredible reception, courtesy, and respect as we're here with our AI company. I've never seen anything like it, Joe, to be honest.
Huh, that's incredible. So this is a new frontier, obviously, for high tech. Is it an answer to our decoupling with China?
You know, I think a lot of people talked about that here. You know, I don't like to, there's so much pride and respect that the Emiratis have when they're having discussions with you, especially when they find out you're a former congressman. They actually sometimes push away from politics because they don't want to get that in the way of business. It is such a respectful culture. And that's something that I've tried to respect as we're going on here. But what you're looking at, I think the UAE, what I was told by somebody very high up in one of the Emirates, you know, listen, Joe, I've been from Abu Dhabi to Dubai, all the way up to Ras Al Khaimah. I've met with the highest, some of the highest, I would say, positions in some of these areas. And what they're saying is like, listen, hey, nobody's ever going to be the United States, but we do believe that we can be the answer, right, for technology and for growing other companies from the United States, but really being that answer to other countries that might be looked at as threat countries. But you have to remember too, UAE does business everywhere. It's a dynamic, diverse, accepting environment as long as you follow the rules, right? You have respect, right? And you go forward in a way that's very, very legal. We've even had discussions with individuals asking us about, can our AI help with compliance? So there's so much going on here. But again, I think the UAE looks at themselves, and also I would say Saudi and Qatar as we're going forward here. I think they look as the linchpin in the global world for a dynamic building of companies and tech services and manufacturing. And what we've seen here, I had some stories, Joe, when me and you have a bourbon sometime, the stories here about the growth of American companies is pretty extraordinary.
Well, this is extraordinary. We saw Jensen Huang there with Donald Trump in the Middle East talking about selling millions of chips in the UAE. When we consider the diversion rule from the Biden administration that came in at the last minute and made this impossible for some of the countries that you're visiting this week, Denver, do we look back at the Biden administration as a misstep on the march to innovation in AI? Are they righting the wrong?
It's actually a really great question. I think, though, when you're looking at China specifically, also when I was on the Financial Services Committee, I had to go to South America and talk about the Belt and Road initiatives from China, which is really a threat to us economically. And we can go on that. I was on the China task force. So I would say that Joe Biden had a very difficult decision on how you protect actually against Chinese practices and what we do with our chip makers and our dominant technology, like with NVIDIA. I think what you're seeing now, as we're seeing sort of this change in the worldscape, is you're looking at security structures that are being actually talked about over here right now. And I think what you're seeing with the UAE, they're actually pledging that they're going to have those security structures in place, right, to guard against any type of, I would say, illegal IP transfer between China, right, and U.S. companies that are coming over here. Last year when I was here, and this is my second time last year, we were actually talking about NVIDIA chips and working through attestations for the State Department to see if we can do it, and it was really a no-go. So it's very interesting to me that NVIDIA now has a play over here, but I do think there could be some security concerns. But looking at the UAE, they have been trying to address that down the line, and it's something I've been very blunt about. And again, they're very respectful when I talk about things. But Joe, I still got to be me, right? And I still got to actually outline the things that I think need. That's just the way I'm wired. But these are, again, I do believe, and I'm going to say this cautiously, I do believe that you see a new security posture here in the UAE that's saying, listen, you come here and American companies will be protected. And that is some of the assurances we've been getting over here. Now, is that true? We'll see. But right now, from what I've seen with the UAE, with Dubai, with Abu Dhabi, all the way up to the northern province of Ras Al Khaimah, I think that we're having a resurgence and looking at security and them as being allies to us in this region. But again, it's trust but verify, but they also think the same about us in some ways too. So it's very interesting.
Wow. This sounds like a fascinating trip for you, Denver. You got to come see us and let's distill everything that you experienced. I want to hear more about the investments you secured and the rest of it when you get back to town. So come see us here in Washington, of course, and travel safe when you get home. The former congressman from Virginia, Denver Riggleman, with his AI company, his security firm, and life in politics, not to mention his experience in the Air Force in the national security space behind him. Really interesting, and we'll have more to discuss with Denver. Maybe over that bourbon. Can we do that here? I think maybe on the Friday edition, if producer James lets us. Thanks for listening to the Balance of Power podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at noontime Eastern at Bloomberg.com.